Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Super-Fanta-Fi. This being a show where I talk about TV shows of the supernatural, fantasy, and/or science fictional genre. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Debris. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, this in particular piece of Debris was really interesting in the sense of that it basically created this field of like half a mile radius of basically it's raining in one particular area, but nowhere in the surrounding area. And it's not just ordinary rain. It seems like some of the people who escaped it ended up dying afterwards, kind of like basically they were deprived of oxygen. Well, what they end up finding is that the debris is basically terraforming this particular area. Everyone that was inside, at first they were having trouble breathing, but all those who stayed inside are fine. They're still going, because obviously they end up also finding these plants in there later on. But it turns out anyone that was in the affected area, the moment they try to leave, they die because basically their bodies aren't adjusted to the outside atmosphere anymore. Because essentially it terraforms it. Instead of like it being oxygen based, it's mainly now chlorine based. So all the plant life is like that, so on and so forth. So like when they're exposed to like the normal atmosphere of the planet, they end up dying. And it's not just them, all the plant life does as well. Obviously there's a lot of people inside. Sophia, it's like, oh, my son Arturo, I can't find him anywhere, and trying to get everyone to stay calm and stay exactly where they are. And so eventually Brian does find Arturo and kind of reunites him with his mom. But now they're in this complicated situation of like, okay, so how do we reverse this? Because there's nothing modern day wise that can do that. Because obviously they need to move the debris, because they need to shut the debris down, because its field of effect is spreading. And along with that information, though, it's like, well, if the debris, the debris is the only thing keeping them alive. It's keeping them in this bubble, this atmospheric bubble, so that the moment it's removed, the atmosphere will potentially go back to the way it was, and obviously we know that will kill them. And now it puts Human in this very complicated position, and obviously this becomes the divide between Finola and Brian on their perspectives on how they see things, because Brian even tells Finola, like, we see things differently. He's like, you see things a certain way that I don't understand, but I respect. And he's like, there's just certain aspects of how I view things that you will not find palatable, because it is the thing of, sadly, it's a numbers game. Like, we have to shut down the debris. Yes, these people will die, but if we leave this debris piece in place, it's going to spread further and further to the county, to the state. So it's like, it sadly becomes that, numbers game. And obviously for Nolan, it's not. It's like, these are people who are alive. Like, are we really going to let them die? Especially because Ephraim pops up, that being Arturo's uncle and Sophia's brother-in-law, because his brother had died like a year prior. So for him, and he had told this story to Finola, that he never really wanted, like, he thought his brother was weird for getting married so young and having a family. It's like he saw what kind of a pressure and quote unquote burden it was for his brother. And obviously when his brother died, it was like, hey, look after my family for me. He's like, what else was I supposed to say? So he did, even to the point like Arturo started calling him Poppy, but he's like, I have to remind him from time to time, I'm your uncle, not your Poppy, because that was Arturo's way of kind of coping with the fact that his dad was gone. And obviously he enjoys, he started kind of seeing the family life as kind of like, oh, I see why this was so important to my brother. Like, it breathed new life into him. But sadly at the same time, like, it is a situation where being away from them made him miss. Because he had, the complaints are just kind of like, oh, why did I do this? Why did I take on this responsibility, this burden? And he thinks this was God's way of punishing him, because, like, I had those thoughts. And so, this family, I kind of looked at almost like this burden and responsibility as thrust on me. It's like, now I missed him. I might not ever get the chance to see them again. And he thinks it's his fault, which Finola explains to him, like, why would God punish you? Because you did the right thing. You respected your brother's wishes. You looked after his family. And yeah, it might have taken a while, but your heart did eventually get there, that you do love them like your own. You care about them. So it isn't just out of obligation. It's because you care for them as deeply. So you're going to fight tooth and nail and, do what you can for them, not just for your brother, but for your own sake, And I thought that was kind of a sad sentiment of like him having that perspective, him kind of having that thought process. But once again, it's like Finola wants to save everyone, but Brian kind of lives in what he believes is like, you want to live in this fantasized, reality of like, yeah, everything will work. It's like, not all these are going to work out perfectly. We're not going to be able to save everyone, and for him, it's like, we at the end of the day have to save, he's like, I want to focus on the people I can save, not the people I can't. Because for Brian, I think he's been through this too many times. Who knows how, like, what Finola, prior to, like, this whole orbital thing, before the debris and everything, we don't know what Finola's life was like, so she may have never been in a situation where there's because he's like, situations like this, it's like, it seems like all familiar territory for Brian, where it's like, if you focus on all the people you couldn't save, like, you will drown in that, like, despair. You will not be able to, I take it as, they didn't really get into it, but I think that's, that's the type of stuff that will keep you up. And I think that's the type of stuff that Brian lives with. Whether he's saying that from personal experience of, I think he focuses on everyone he can never save. I think that's what the picture we got, like, what, two episodes ago, like the one that was in Clone Brian's pocket. I believe that's what that picture represents. That represents someone he couldn't save, that he, so he doesn't share it much. But I think that's kind of what that's potentially set up to be, kind of implying. So we'll kind of see. And I thought it was really interesting too, because obviously you have that dude Beck coming in, being the one that's like, okay, they're there to kind of contain the debris and kind of take it away. But when the time was, about like, okay, making these moves, Beck says something of like, oh yeah, that partner of yours, Finola, kind of reminds me of Julian. And it's kind of like, it's like, do you remember Julian? He was like, how could I forget? And because it was like back when things were simpler, and it's like, and he's like, oh yeah, Langley's always kind of, things have always been a certain way. He's like, no, not just then. Well, yes, that, but he's like, before the debris, I think it made his job was a lot simpler. I think with what he had to do before, it was never being in people's lives, like connecting with people on some level, like probably interacting with people was just never really too much of the job. It's just, you had your orders, you did what you needed to do, and you just kind of bounced. I think that's an element to this that Brian still kind of latches onto, just because I think getting too attached to people will just kind of, you'll suffer. I think it probably kind of feels like you'll suffocate a little bit from everything. It could become too much, and it just, but then he's like, oh, it's like, why'd you bring up Julian? It's like, well, much like your partner Finola, they say she has a big heart. People say the same thing about Julian, that he had a big heart. And it's like, he died a hero. He died the way he wanted to. He died a hero. And it's like, yeah, it's easy for you to say, I'm the one that had to tell his wife. And he's like, what's your point? And he was like, don't let her drag you down. So I look at that as kind of that thing of, don't let her sentimental heart like make you kind of like getting like, this is, I think he's kind of implying like, what we do, what we've had to do, like, means not getting sentimental, because when you get sentimental, you start, you won't come home alive. You'll do things, you'll risk things, and maybe in the case of Julian, he sacrificed himself because his heart was too big. And it's like, Finola's the same way. So it's like, basically, don't let her drag you down, in the sense of, don't let her big heart make you kind of have a big heart. In this line of work, you need to just be like, compartmentalize. And Finola doesn't really do that. Brian does. So maybe that's what he's implying in that sense. Or maybe like, if something happens to her, like, don't let that like drag you down as well. I don't know. Like, it could be one or the other, but it could just be both in what he meant by that. Because I think being around Finola has made Brian kind of, and he talked about it, I think, in the first episode, but it was just kind of like, he's kind of felt human for the first time in a long time. I think you kind of have to doing what maybe he did before is kind of a thing of, you have to shut that side of yourself off and kind of tapping into that more human element after so long, and I think Finola is kind of one of the reasons why he's able, and reason why he is doing that now, so. But as I was talking about before, having looked at, like, what was interesting too is, like, the lady, April, she was explaining, like, the terraforming, basically, interestingly enough, it came at them at attacking the more important parts. Like, obviously, this shift to, like, needing chlorine instead of oxygen, it hit the places that it would need to hit first, like the more important vital aspects of the body kind of hit them first, the more important parts to kind of begin the terraforming process just within the human body in itself. So I thought that was kind of an interesting element. But once again, it's like the technology needed to reverse this could be years down the road. But then this actually sparked something in Finola. She was like, okay, there was a piece of debris 489, which also showcases just, I mean, considering what we saw at Langley, how many pieces they have, it's understandable that we're up into the hundreds and stuff like that. But it's like, okay, the debris 489. Well, because you also have to think about it too, because not all they're categorized a certain number wise and stuff like that, but not all of them are like small debris pieces. I think some are like, it's just, it probably ranges from, hey, this is 321 and it's a small piece, but this one 489 ended up being this massive piece, because I think it's not, each individual debris, like whether it's a small piece or a large piece like that, gets categorized as just one, I think. Maybe not. I don't know. I just thought that was fascinating. But 489 is basically, it puts whoever's nearby in stasis. Suspensia is kind of the title that they'd given to it. And obviously for Brian, it's like, well, the fact is we don't know that what this will do because it hasn't been tested on humans. But for Finola, it's like, it doesn't matter. This is giving them a chance. Like, giving them a chance is better than just them dying. And I think Brian's coming from the perspective of, we don't want to give them false hope. It's kind of the reason why you don't want to do this, because we don't know if it will work, But for her, it's like taking that chance is better than not doing anything at all. So it is a situation of, she actually went to Maddox about it. Maddox gave the go-ahead. And, Brian is like, well, I guess that's that. Because it's a thing of, I think for him, it's like, oh, so talking to me is a formality anyway. So, like, what's, it's almost like, oh, well, I guess it's in a discussion because you've already set everything in motion. But for him, it was this line I thought that was interesting where he's like, we're supposed to be a blip in these people's lives. We're not meant to be, memories. We're not, because I think for him, it's like, he's coming from the perspective of Finola's getting too attached to these people. You're connecting with them. He kind of has too, but I think it's the thing of, like, he's, once again, good at compartmentalizing, where he's trying to just sever that. Like, it's just a job where you kind of have to weigh the options, and you can't always do, for him, doing the right thing is doing what's kind of for the greater good. That I think maybe that's kind of has been his way of looking at things for a long time now. And because even he was telling her earlier, like, you are going to, every aspect, every fiber of your being is literally telling you to try and do something. You need to ignore that side of yourself right now, because this is what needs to be done for the greater good. And once again, like, that debris piece needs to be removed, or it's going to spread and more people are going to be caught up in it. So yeah, to save these few lives could jeopardize so many other lives in the process. So once again, it's not like there's an easy choice, especially considering right now there is no solution to all of this. But she wants to tell Afrain, but Brian is kind of like, don't. Because I think in his mind, it's like telling him the truth, there's no good that's going to come from that. Because you telling him the truth, it's just good because it's something he can't really do anything about. Like, it's nothing he can help. Like, so all he's going to be doing is drowning in his own worries and stuff like that. And I think, for Brian, it's like, that's the best thing of not letting him, he'll look at you like a monster, he'll hate you a little bit for, especially after she made the promise of, hey, I'll save your family, I promise to do what I can. But it's like, I think for Brian, it's a thing of, you're doing the better option by not telling him anything, because if you tell him otherwise, all he's going to do is worry, and like I said, there's just nothing he can do about it. So, but obviously everything changes for her the moment she learns from Ferris, oh yeah, so the Americans, for one, your dad's alive. It's like, no, I was with his body. No, we've got proof that he's alive. We also got some communications that showcases that the Americans know that Brian knew. And I was like, I figured that this was what was going to happen. Like, Brian wanted to tell her, but ultimately wouldn't, just because, following orders. And so now it's a situation of, she had to find out on her own, and now she sees proof of, like, wait, my dad's alive. Wait, like, Ferris is like, I want you to, we don't know what this information is, that basically it's like, I know how you feel about this. I know how this is going to, what this is going to cause for you, but we need to kind of handle this properly, like figure out what this really means and everything. So it's like, kind of don't go off a little half-cocked when it comes to this situation. We got to wait and figure it out. But that situation sparked her to talk to Ephraim and tell him and explain everything. Because for her, it's like, he's like, what made her change her mind about telling him the truth? And for her, it's like, if I were in your circumstances, I would want to know the truth. Because that was her whole thing of like, they deserve to know the truth, you know, no matter how hard it is. And obviously, you know, that kind of bothers Ryan hearing that, because he's been keeping the truth from her the entire time about, you know, her dad. So for her, it's like, I would want someone to tell me the truth so that I could do whatever I needed to do or wanted to do with that information. So Ephraim ends up running in there, obviously, like immediately he starts going through the change, but he's with, you know, Sophia and Arturo, and she's like, what are you gonna do? It's like, yeah, I'm here. You know, it's like they've got a way to get us out. So he's the only person that knows the truth about what this means. But for them, it's like, you know, they won't age. It'll be like one moment to the next. It'll be like, we're frozen this moment, but then like when we do get unthawed or unstasis, unsuspensioned, it'll be like no time has passed at all, you know? And that is a sad thing, because if they had, like, I think in the long run, Finola did the right thing, because by telling him, he got to be with his family, because otherwise he would have been, you know, it would have been years before he got to see them. He would have had to spend that entire time without them. And obviously now, knowing how he feels, like, Finola's like, no, he deserves to know. And it's like, it's up to him to decide what he wants to do. And obviously he showcased it like, hey, I don't want to be away from this family. It means the world to him now. Once again, it's not just for an obligation, because of, yeah, he initially did this for his brother, but now it's because he loves them and cares for them. So I think that in itself means a lot. And obviously, what was interesting, though, is like, because I wondered if Brian was going to be there at first when Ephraim was there, but I think he wasn't there. And now, when it was all said and done, he came through and he sees Ephraim's there, but he kind of sees it like, oh, they're happy and united. But he goes back to Finola, and it's like, why'd you do that? And he's like, I just want to understand why. And she's like, you won't understand. I'm just going to catch a ride with someone else. Obviously keeping her distance from Brian, because it's like, you knew that all this entire time. And I'm wondering at the end, did he kind of figure like, she's pissed at me, right? So either he's figuring out like she knows about her dad somehow, or I don't know. I mean, it's a sad situation where it's like, I can understand 100% on why she's mad, because it's like, you kept this information, because I think for her it's like, we're partners in this, but also I think on some level she was kind of thinking like, especially all the time they spent together, like that, you know, we were friends on some level, but now it's like, oh, you've kept this from me. But also it's just like, I think it's from the, like I said, the perspective of like, I think Brian can understand, but I think it's been so long that human element kind of got ripped away from him because of his experiences and stuff like that, because we've seen that, like, to make Arturo feel better, he's like, yeah, I'll give you these shades. Yeah, these shades were worn by the king's not scared of anything, you know. So to make Arturo, like, so it showcases, like, you've seen that human side of him, even though he kind of tries to bury it at the end of the day. So I mean, it all kind of worked out in the end, but it's still kind of a sad thing of like, these people's lives are affected. Granted, they're still alive. They won't feel the time passing, but it's still, at least they're together in this. And Ephraim doesn't have to, like, you know the entire time that it'll be maybe years before he sees him again. So at least in this time, under no matter what, it's like they don't have to be afraid because they have each other in this moment, you know? So I think that, means a lot. So like I said, I think Finola did the right thing, but it's just, I think Finola's going to look at Brian a different way. She kind of always has, like, oh, you'll never understand. I think he does, but I think he's got a job he has to do, and I think for him, he might bring it up of being like, oh, like, I've had to live a certain life that, if I've seen and experienced things that you haven't had to live with, and they change you, for better or for worse, you're changed because of them, and it's like, maybe for him, it's like, you have the luxury of being able to not have been changed by, I mean, granted, she's been changed in her own rights because of thinking her dad was dead, but now thinking like, oh, Influx has them and stuff like that. Granted, that was kind of my thought. Like, at first I was thinking, like, is he working with Influx? But it's like, no, like, I was thinking like maybe they worked for him. I was thinking like I kind of initially had that thought. I was like, oh, you faked your death and everything, but it's like no, like they faked his death or brought him back or whatever the case may be, and because they need him and he's being held hostage. Not unless we find out like it might be a little bit of also an NBC obviously timeless thing of like, oh, initially it seems like you were being held hostage, but you were just as much a part of this. Like it might be something of that nature as well. Maybe not. So it might be a thing of, hey, he starts off appearing to be like, oh, he's just being held captive. He's being forced to do this, but it might turn out to be, actually, I want to do this. I believe in this. Once again, that was my initial thought, but it shifted. Doesn't mean it won't be revealed that ends up being the case. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens between Finola and Brian now, because obviously she's probably she has no choice but to kind of work with him under these circumstances. But knowing that the Americans in general kept it from her is one thing, but also knowing that Brian did, it's a whole other issue within itself. So we'll see where things kind of go from there, whether Brian will be able to get her trust back, if he can even say anything that would change her mind. We'll see kind of on that front. But there's also like an interesting little moment we had this episode with Maddox, where once again, I don't know if that's his wife or ex, whatever the case may be. Like, he's with his son, Dario, and we still don't know what Dario's condition is. And part of me wonders, once again, is that some of the reason why he's doing what he's doing with the, where it seemed like he was trying to sell some of the debris last episode, as well as, like, why he's so fascinated in pieces of debris. Like, maybe he figured he could use it for his personal gain. Maybe it's about, like I said, maybe it's, like, having enough money to take care of Dario, like, whatever needs that he might need met. But what was interesting is like a phone started ringing, he goes and answered it, but it was like, oh, an unknown caller. And the moment the person, he answered it, the person hung up, and it was like, and I think his wife or whatever comes over and is like, well, what was that? It's like, oh yeah, the phone was ringing, it was an unknown caller. And she's like, I don't go answering your phone. He's like, I just thought it was weird. She's like, this isn't the job, Craig. Not everything is a conspiracy. And I think for him, it's like, considering everything that's going down recently, I think for him, he's just like, he doesn't know if it's someone trying to reach out to him, like trying to be low key about it, because obviously the guy he was trying to sell it to last episode, like, he got busted being inside the country. So like the government's got eyes on him. So it's like, damn it, it kind of screws over my situation there. Not less that's kind of implying him wondering if his wife or whatever has got some like side situation going on. I don't know if like, but it's like, that's the fact is they went out of their way to kind of showcase that means like there's something there. Now, whether it's just going to be on a personal level for his story or whether it's connected to the grand scheme of everything going down is going to be a whole other question within itself. I just thought that was interesting because that was like the only moment in the episode we had something like that. So I'm like, okay, we're getting pieces little by little about Maddox. So I'm curious to find out what that was really all about. Whether it ends up, like I said, being significant towards the overarching plot. I would think so, considering they introduced it like that. But we'll ultimately have to, wait and see where all this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. So the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.